Hey loves, welcome to another tutorial. So this is the part 2 of our previous video, which is the sewing tutorial. In my last video I showed you how to go about the cutting. So if you are yet to see it, I would advise that you go ahead and see the pattern drafting tutorial before watching the sewing video. So with that being said, let's get started with the tutorial. Alright guys, these are the patterns we drafted in the last video, and I've gone ahead to cut my lining, and I've also gone ahead to trace my darts on the skirt, and we'll pin this down. So I went ahead to pin all my darts on the skirt part, and I'm also going ahead now to remove my pattern paper. After that, I will open this up and place them right sides facing each other like so, and we'll go ahead and secure with some pins. So after that, we are going to sew from top to bottom where the pinning is, okay? Where that curved line is, we are going to sew from top to bottom. So here I'll go ahead and place the second part on the other side and also secure with some pins. After that, I'll put this aside and also repeat the same thing for the lining. I'll pin one side together, right sides facing each other, and also pin the other side also right sides facing each other like so. Now I'm also going to put the lining aside and work on the back. Now for the back, I'm also going to remove my patterns, and then we'll pin the dart area together. So you see how I'm picking it up. I'll pin that side, right sides facing each other like so. So here I'm going ahead to secure with some pins. I'll also flip the other one on top, and we'll do the same thing for the lining. So this is how it looks like. I went ahead to stitch them all up. I also press my seams. This is how it is. I press my seams open, and I also went ahead to sew my darts on the skirt. Now I'll put that aside, and I'll be joining the front and back pieces together. So I'm going to put them right sides facing each other like this, and then I'll stitch with the seam allowance I gave whilst cutting. So repeat the same thing for the skirt by putting them right sides together like so, and we're also going to stitch the sides with the seam allowance we gave while cutting. Okay, so after stitching, this is how it looks like. This is how the front looks like, and this is the lining as well, the lining for the top, and this is how the skirt looks like. Okay, so putting this aside to work on the sleeve. Okay, so here we'll go ahead and work on the sleeve. Okay, for this part, we are going to attach the peplums on the sleeve. In total, we'll have 4 peplums on one sleeve. One will be sewn across the neckline, and the other 3 will be attached to the sleeve itself. So here I'm going ahead to secure this with some pins. I'll later on remove this one, okay? This is just to help me get my first demarcation for the second layer. Okay, so this is where it stops. Now I will take one of the small peplums, that is the 360 flare that we cut. I'm going to take that one and put it under just to see if it overlaps. Okay, and yes, it stops at that side where my hand is. That is where it stopped. So I'm going to take the measurement from the top to that side. Okay, all right, so here I went ahead to measure from that side to where it stops, which is 6.5 inches. So I'll take the measurement all across. Here I went ahead to remove that one because that was just to help us get it. So yeah, I went ahead to measure all across to the last end, and I also opened it up and also measured to the other end as well. Okay, so here I still continue to mark my 6.5 inches all across, okay? And here I was just trying to make sure that side shows well because we are going to use that part a lot. Okay, so here I'm putting the peplum back on it, okay, to also help me get the one that will also fall under this one. Okay, so I also got 6 inches from that side. So I'll take my measurement from the first mark line to where the 6 inches will stop. Okay, so after getting that, I turn the sleeve to the wrong side and mark my seam allowance to a point. Okay, I marked only after the first mark line we did, you see. So what I meant is that you are going to mark to a point and stitch that line. So this is what I meant. I only stitch from top to a point where the first marking is. So you stitch it below the first marking, okay? The reason for this is to have enough space to sew because this can be a little tricky, okay? So after that, this is how it looks like, okay? So we are going to attach the peplum to it. So before attaching, I'll go ahead and overlock the rough edges, okay? So this peplum, we are not going to cut through, okay? So, but before I proceed, let's do the last marking, okay? So I'll put this back on the previous line, then I'll secure this with a pin, okay? And then I'll put the last one under it just to see where it's going to stop. I'll put this under it. If I'm okay with the result, then I'll go ahead and measure that side. That is where it will stop. So I went ahead to measure and it's 4 inches, and then I went ahead to also pin to see how it will look like. I like the result, so I'm going to now remove the pin and then take out the measurements all across. Yeah, I've already gone ahead to overlock the rough edges, okay? So we are going to now fix this to the sleeve. So we'll take one of the peplums, okay? And then you are going to pass this through. So you let it pass through the sleeve, okay? So this is how you do it. And then you make sure it falls on the first line, okay? The first indication that we did, you make sure it falls on that line, and then you secure with some paint. You need to first secure with some paint so that when you go to the sewing machine, it will be easy to work with, okay? Before achieving this, you need to flip the peplum backwards before you can pin it so that when we stitch, it will cover the seam line, okay, like this. You see how it looks like? Okay, so I'll go ahead and stitch. So this is how it looks like after stitching it. It looks neat. So now I'm going to turn it over to the wrong side, okay? So I'm going to turn it over to the wrong side. And then you see the seam allowance. If you look at it very well, though I stitched that area, I didn't stitch on the seam allowance, okay? So this is how it looks like. When you are stitching, when you reach this point, flip it to the other side. So when you're also getting to the last point, you also flip it to the opposite direction like this, okay? With that, you can easily alterate it when you want to open up the sleeve, okay? Okay. All right, then let's proceed. So I'm going to stitch the second peplum. So before that, I'll have to stitch that side of the seam allowance. So I'll stitch from where I first stopped, and then this side, the marking wasn't visible, so I just went ahead to draw that. So I will stop below that mark, okay? Right here, I've gone ahead to stitch, and then I'll turn this to the right side to see if everything is sewn well. So I'll just go ahead and bring everything out. Now, so for the second part, I will flip this to the other side and also pass the sleeve through the peplum like this to the point where we marked, okay? So when it reaches that point, I will then flip it over again. I will then flip it over, you see. So at this part, the peplum will be a bit bigger than the that part of the sleeve. So I'll pleat it in a bit when there is excess. So right here, I'm going ahead to pin to secure because it needs to be secure before I go to the sewing machine to stitch, okay? So I'm securing this with a pin, and then here it is. I've gone ahead to stitch this, and this is how it looks like, okay? I've pleat some parts into it also, and this is how it looks like. So now what we are left to do is to join the third one. So now for the third one, I will then again turn to the wrong side. I'll turn it to the wrong side like this, and also stitch from where I stop to the next mark point, okay? Also below the mark point, we are still going to leave small opening there so that we can join when it's time to join the peplum, okay? All right, so I just went ahead to make the chalk mark visible again, and I'll stitch to that point. Here I've already gone ahead to stitch that side. Okay, so we'll turn it to the right side again. We'll turn it to the right side again and making sure everything is well fixed. Then I'll flip. Still this side wasn't out, so I'm trying to bring everything out and then flip the previous ones to the top. Then I'll also pass this through. Okay, so when it reaches the line, I'll now secure it with pins. But this side, you could see this one is even bigger than the previous one. It's bigger than the sleeve, so it needs a lot of pleating. So here I'll go ahead and make some pleats and then secure with the pin, but then I'll do the rest when sewing. Okay, but you need to secure some parts before. So this is what it looks like. I've already gone ahead to stitch. And now I need to complete the seam allowance. I need to sew that back in. So you see we are left with some small parts. So I'll stitch that side. And after stitching, I'll then fold in the hem of the sleeve to sew the rough edges. Okay, I'll fold that in and sew. So after doing that, here is the top, and then I'm going to attach the sleeve to the top. Okay, so before that, my seam allowance is big. If I just go ahead and sew, it's going to give me a funny look at that side. So I'm folding it in a V shape, and then I'll also do the same thing for the seam allowance on the top as well. Okay, so after doing that, I'll go ahead and align the side seams together. Okay, and also secure that with some paint, and proceed to pin the rest of the armhole before going to my machine to stitch that side. Okay, so when I do this, I'll also repeat the same thing for the second sleeve. Okay, I'll also pin the second armhole and then also stitch that side and show you. All right, so here it is. This is how it's looking like. Here I'm just trying to make sure the seams have aligned perfectly. Okay, so yeah, this is how it is looking like so far. We'll go ahead and attach the final peplum, and this is the one that will be on the neckline. And for this one, we are going to stitch them together. You see, this one is 720, meaning we have two of these. So we are going to attach these together first with half seam allowance. So here I went ahead to pin, and then I'll go ahead and stitch that side. So after stitching, I'll fold the ends of the peplum like so, and also go and run a stitch at that side. This is to prevent any rough edges. Okay, so here I'm going ahead to pin this down. I'm going ahead to pin this down before going to my machine to sew. Okay, so for the hem of the peplums, we are going to lock that side. I will send it for them to lock it for me. I don't have the locking machine, so I'll first now sew the ends and then leave the hem for locking. Okay, yeah, so after doing that, I'll go ahead and run a gathering stitch at that side because we made the peplum bigger than the neckline. So I'll go ahead and run some gathering stitch at that side. Okay, so yeah, I've already gathered my peplum and we'll be attaching these to the neckline. So the neckline, the peplum is not starting from the center back. So I'll measure 6 inches from that point, and I'll start pinning from that 6 inches notch. Okay, so that is where I'll start pinning from. So I will secure it with pins all through, and then when I'm reaching the end of the top as well, I also measure 6 inches from the other end and pin it all through. Okay, so I'm securing this with pin from the beginning to the end. So at the side of the center back too, I'm going to measure the 6 inches and also make a notch at that point and gather the rest of the peplum to fit to that side. at this part I'll be using the lining to turn the neckline, but then there is no sleeve on the lining, but there is a sleeve fixed on the dress. So what we are going to do is that I will attach a bias at the armhole area. Okay, I'll attach a bias at the armhole area, and it will improvise as a sleeve. Okay, so it will be like an off shoulder sleeve, and we'll use that to turn the neckline. Okay, so I'll put the lining on the dress like this so that I can measure where the bias will be. So that will be from one armhole to the other. So yeah, I went ahead to take that measurement, and I'll use that to cut the bias. So for this, you can also cut the fabric on bias. Okay, you can also use the main fabric and cut that on bias. Okay, so by this I'm using this black bias. Okay, all right. So before attaching the bias, I went ahead to overlock the armhole. So I'll fix the bias at the armhole region like so. So I'll pin to one end and also pin the other side, and then I'll go ahead and stitch with half an inch seam allowance. Okay, so this is it. I've gone ahead to fix that on both armhole, and we'll be attaching it at the neck region. Okay, we'll use that to turn the neckline. Okay, so here I'll go ahead and start pinning. Okay, I'll pin from the center back all through to the last end. Okay, because I've already secured the peplum on the dress. So all I need to do is fix the lining at that side. Okay, we are going to use that to turn the neckline. So at the side of the bias, I will have to stitch on that folded line. You see the folded line on the bias. I'll have to stitch on that line, but I'll make sure it passes on the stitch line, the first stitch line I used to secure the peplum and the top. The first stitch line that I used to secure them together, it has to pass on that line. Okay, so when I was attaching the bias, you see the end of the bias, the side out won't be attached to the neckline. That side has to be folded in. Okay, so here is the result. This is it. I'll go ahead and top stitch, and I'll make sure the allowance, the seam allowance that is inside will be under the lining before I top stitch it. Okay, so I've gone ahead to stitch that in place, and I've also secured them together with some pins. I've secured the waistline with some pins. I matched the seams together. Okay, so here I remove the pins to show you. So I'm going ahead to secure it back in place. Okay, I will secure it back in place, and then you see the area of the bias, the armhole side. We are going to do a top stitch on the bias as well, but when we are attaching that, I will flip the peplum upwards. Okay, so that I don't have to stitch on it. Okay, so I'm going to stitch on that part like this. I'll stitch on that part just to hold the bias in place. So this is it. I don't know if it's clear enough, but this is what I meant. So the stitches are not on the peplum, but rather on the sleeve. Okay, all right, so we'll go ahead and attach the skirt part to the top. Okay, I will align the seams together. I'll first pin the side seams together. Okay, and also match the dots and pin all the way to the end, and after that I'll go ahead and stitch that and show you. All right, so this is what we have. The dress is almost done. Yeah, so we'll just go ahead now and finish the back and the hem of the dress. Okay, so I'll go ahead and stitch the back. Okay, I'll go ahead and stitch that side. So I'll flip this to the wrong side. I'll flip this to the wrong side, and I'll later on go and overlock the rough edges inside. Okay, so I'll pull this together like this and measure 9 inches down from the waist. Okay, I'll measure 9 inches down from the waist, and then I'll just secure that side with a pin. So meaning I'm stitching from that 9 inches point down to the hem of the skirt. Okay, yeah, so I went ahead to overlock all the rough edges. I overlocked the hem as well. Okay, so it's time to finish the hem. I will just fold this in and secure with some pins, then I'll go over to my machine and stitch that down. Okay, but before doing that, I have one more thing to do. You see the armhole area. Okay, we are going to attach the lining and the main dress together. You see it's separated. We are going to make a stitch line at that side just to hold it in place. Okay, so I'll go ahead and secure with some pins, and when sewing I'll make sure I stitch on the first line. Okay, I'll sew it on the first line, the first stitch line. Okay, so this is it. This is, I've already completed the two armhole, I've completed the hem, and now it's time to fix our zip. All right, so I'll secure this with some pins and I'll go ahead and stitch this. And yeah, that's all for the making of this dress, guys. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you find it helpful, and I'll be seeing you guys in my next video. Bye bye.